In today's episode of Leading Strong, Brandon and I dive back into the 4 management styles, and we explore the manager intelligence skills, inspiration, and inclusive as part of our ongoing Season 1 recap. Let's dive right in.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Leading Strong, the place to be to level up your leadership effectiveness on one of your most important roles, engaging your employees. Managers are responsible for at least 70% of their employees' engagement. The best managers, like you, lead strong by constantly honing and developing the skills needed to keep their teams engaged. Your hosts, Darren Veresamy and Brandon Miller, are the co-founders of 34 Strong, a company that creates great places to work. Their team has worked in Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and small businesses to lead strong. Now over to Darren.
Welcome to Season 1 of Leading Strong, where we will dive deep to grow your manager intelligence. I'm your host, Darren Veresamy, here to serve you in your continued discovery and growth to lead strong. This episode of Leading Strong is brought to you by 34 Strong, where organizations just like yours become great places to work. To find out more, check out 34strong.com. Well, hey, Brandon.
Hey, Darren.
Right on. We are in the recap of Season 1 here on Leading Strong. Last time we got to talk about the 4 T's of management. And this week we're going to get into talking about the 4 types of management. This is some of the stuff that we covered at the beginning of the season. And then we're going to start working on connecting these to some of these manager intelligence skills that we've talked about over the course of the season. Take us through those 4 types of management. What's the recap of those and what are they?
Yeah, so the primary style that is the most effective is what we call authoritative. And as we covered in that session, you could say these are strengths-based managers. The term authoritative is synonymous with being focused on strengths. They're strong at the human side, the warmth, the inclusion, being personable, caring about people. That's half the strength. And the other part is that they are great process managers. And it's rare to have a people and process manager, but they're strong on directives, coming up with clarity around what they want people to do and how they want to get it done. They hold people accountable and they can be assertive. And so that style is the one that really, if you're going to put a bullseye on one, that is where you're aiming your managers at. Now, next to that, you can think of these 2 styles as primarily where most of us start from, and that's permissive or authoritarian. 2 sides of the same coin. So authoritarian, this is command and control. You got to get it done because it's required now. It's very directive, and it is good at that side of things, good at the process side, good at the operations, moving things forward in a very directive and orderly way, where permissive folks, they're good at the people side, very good at the warmth and inclusion, very good at making sure that others feel a sense of belonging. But where both have their challenges is authoritarian may struggle on people, permissive on process. And so where do frustrated managers end up, Darren? Call it uninvolved.
Yeah, so what do they call it? Retired on active duty or something like that, we've heard. There's so many different terms like that, right? But tell us a little bit more about uninvolved and actually how this is actually the worst place for you as a manager to be. And if you're a leader, the worst place that you can have your managers, because this actually has profound impacts on employee engagement and not in a good way.
No, it does not. When a person ends up here, it is the consequence of frustration. That's the doorway. So we talked some about fascination versus frustration when we think about people management. It's the difference between, wow, that's really interesting, or wow, that really irritates me. And when dichotomy exists and you allow the irritation, the frustration to set in, it starts to impact your own engagement. And often just by virtue of trying to find a safe place, this is where you close the door, you turn off the camera, you don't engage, you retreat back to a place of safety and sanctuary because you're over it. Well, if you linger there long, in fact, I just asked this to a group of managers today. I said, what is the consequence of leaving a toddler unsupervised for any length of time? And so, people in the room said, Nothing good. I said, no, my grandson was over yesterday and his dad, my son, and I were watching a game. And as we're watching the game, it dawned on both of us, where's the little one? And in exchange for our lack of focus on the little one, we had a piece of furniture that was newly decorated with a large red pen that was now covered in the toddler's new and unique designs. Well, what I told the group today was that adults aren't that different from toddlers. Just let them be ignored for a while, and you will end up with your own version of a red pen design on whatever you think is important. And that's the consequence of uninvolved. It's if you linger there long, the consequences come quickly.
And the toddler didn't think the toddler was doing anything wrong at the time, and the adult might not think they're doing anything wrong at the time in that place. So the moral of that story is if you need new furniture that's custom designed, be sure to contact Brandon, right? Because his grandson will be glad to come over and design your furniture just in time for the holidays now.
Walker will happily do that for you.
He'll be writer, right? And color. And if you put paint on his shoes too, right, Brandon? He'll do some walking along there too.
Oh, absolutely.
When we think of these areas here, when we think of being uninvolved, permissive, authoritarian, and authoritative, people get into this place, especially right now on the uninvolved side. It's interesting. You had the experience with your grandson, with Walker. And this weekend, I was catching up with a good friend of mine, and he was telling me how much he just loved his job before COVID. And he still really likes his work, but he's not going into the office as much. And he mentioned that he's in an experience where his manager, who was actually quite personable, seems to be under so much under the gun, has just become a task list, focal point drill sergeant, where it's just coming out in these email communications, and a lot of the human elements aren't actually taking place. This was the interesting part, is he said his boss is not really uninvolved, but definitely not involved, and didn't used to necessarily be in that scenario where they were like authoritarian, command and control type. But it's feeling that way because so much of the human connection's gone down. In this season that we're in, before we jump over into two of our manager intelligence skills today that we'll talk about on the heels of this, can you tell us, in a virtual or in a distributed workforce environment, how we can slip into some of the less helpful components, how we can slip into uninvolved completely unintentionally, even if maybe we were an authoritative leader?
Yeah. Well, I think your comment is really important. It has to do with being proactive. So we've talked about the three positions managers can occupy. You could be an advocate, adversary, or you can become ambivalent. An advocate in a season like this requires that you're proactive with your people. You're taking the time to understand where they're coming from. You've embraced the reality of the blurred line no longer is blurred. There is no line between personal and professional knowledge of a team member you're managing. It's both. It's an understanding of what is your reality and how do I manage you with that reality in mind first? Because if I lean into the stuff we need done because we got to get it done, I am just trying to fill the directives that my leaders have put upon me, we're going to disengage folks. And as they become disengaged, the pressure mounts on us. We can push back and not remain proactive. And so, as you've known, Darren, I think what can happen easily is managers slip into the mode of, I just have to do it myself. So now I am trying to manage me and my time. Achievers are especially notorious for this. It's a Clifton strength that has them just taking on and taking on and taking on. And that will inevitably lead to a place of imbalance. And when we arrive there, that, I'm just overwhelmed, it will start to appear uninvolved, that I'm ignoring, that I'm withdrawn, I'm focused. And that's the common place where a manager will land, is it's not they're sitting on their hands, they're just trying to make up for all the work. So you're going to do the work one way or the other. The hard work of staying authoritative is hard work. It's the key indicator of success in management is, can I stay in this place where I'm attending to you personally while also controlling and engaging the process and the program and the output that we need to do?
Yeah. And I want to just build upon that. It's hard work either way. For all of you listening in, it's hard work either way. You can go through the hard work of working to be an authoritative manager, or you can go through the hard work of just trying to be the individual contributor that's doing all the work of your team because you haven't spent the time to develop the team to make the connection. And that is such a challenging place to get through. And remember, if you are listening to this and maybe you've just recently found yourself in a management role, we've said this many, many times, but what got you here? What may have gotten you here as a strong individual contributor, right? We talked last episode about the 4Ts, that technical background and that tenure. That might have been what got you to this point as a manager. What keeps us there and makes us really successful is our ability to engage our people. And that does take work to develop and to grow in those particular areas. If not, that knee jerk is to go right back to, I'll do it. And what do we communicate there? We communicate, I don't trust my people. I don't trust my people, when really they might just need a little bit of training. They might need some clarifying on a couple of things with you, but that time is really, really going to be important. And that can come across highly uninspiring, which is how we're going to segue right over to the two manager intelligence skills that we'll unpack today in relation to this here is inspiration and the manager intelligence skill of inclusive. And when we think of inspiration, right, Brandon, there's so much focus that we get into in the importance of the mission. We want to just go back and give just a general replay of what the skill was and what are some key questions or areas that we can grow in these skills as we're looking back at the course of season 1. But mission really matters, I think, more today than ever before. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how we can actually grow in those skills? We'll unpack that in just a minute.
Yeah, more than what we even, I think, understand in terms of its impact upon our psychology. When I feel, I know, I believe, I see, I experience my role having an impact, making a difference, something that I can look to and see its outcome, that is incredibly motivating. That's inspiring. And we don't always see that for ourselves. In fact, it's interesting, Darren, the number one indicator of whether a manager will or will not engage is if they feel like their job is aligned with a mission. Number one. And therefore, as management engagement goes, it directly influences team engagement. In fact, minimum 70% is the minimum influence a manager has upon a team member's engagement. So the clarifying of a person's impact upon the mission, the values of the organization is vital, but it bears repeating. And that's what we talked about when we went over this, is how important it is to repeat the reality of someone's impact. Repetition equals significance. The more we hear it, the more we believe it, the more it stands out in our mind as something that makes a significant difference on the work that we're trying to do.
It's very important. At 34 Strong, we actually end every single meeting that we have. We ask the question of our whole team, and it's not necessarily Brandon and I saying this, it's our team that leads this rally. We'll ask a simple question: who are we? We'll say, we are 34 Strong, all together, even on Zoom, right? Sometimes it's a little disjointed in that place, but who are we? We're 34 Strong. What do? We create great places to work. And that's just the reminder to all of us, to every single person on your team, even if they're the one that is dealing with the contract management side, or they're dealing with accounts receivable, they might not see the ripple impact of what the work is that the organization does. But when they're reminded, it's like, oh yeah, this piece of the puzzle has to be here to make this full picture come together. And it gives that relevance. That is so critical. So what are you doing to make sure that you're aligned with the mission? And are you even clear of the mission of your own organization? And how can we sprinkle that in? On this lens of inspiration, do you have any tips, any perspective that we can remind listeners of, Brandon, that they can get in to grow this inspiration skill or help get their team inspired? Any key questions they can ask in one-to-ones or share with the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we consider inspiration, the skill to individualize plays so heavily here, and they do pair so well together. When we know what it is that a person receives in terms of recognition, when we're aware of their role as it relates to the organization, when we're aware of their aspirations, this is critical, because when I know that a team member wants to have a bigger play, they want to have a broader impact, that is really important to understand, because the more that I trail that into the conversation and make them aware of what they're doing and what they could be doing, That's incredibly inspiring. I had a conversation with one of our team members at 34 Strong recently where we were discussing their current role and discussing where their role is growing and where it's going. And from that, painted the picture of, and here's what that's going to do. Here's how it's going to impact the people we serve. Here's how it will impact our own organization. And the person's comment was, wow, I'm so excited. That's exactly some of the places where I want to go. I can really see myself doing that. And they felt that that really aligned with their strengths. It really aligned with what motivated and inspired them. It was one of those conversations that they will remember and I will remember as a key point in their opportunity to serve our mission at 34 Strong.
Yeah, inspiration is huge. And just think of how you can trip that wire for somebody to really get them into that place. And coming back to the skill of individualized, definitely re-listen to that episode that was earlier in the season. That was early in season 1. And we did cover some of it briefly in our last debrief here for the season. I want to transition us over to the second manager intelligence skill that we'll talk about in today's episode to close us out here. And it's the skill of inclusive, right? So we've heard a lot in 2020 about we need to be more inclusive. And there's a whole bunch of work that's taking place in the space of creating more inclusive workplaces. That's very, very important. We want to ask the question, though, what does it mean to focus on inclusive as a skill for a manager to be able to grow in terms of how they're approaching their team? Because what we know is with this skill, when managers are really strong in it, their teams are actually more resilient and they're stronger in going through it. Can you give us just a little bit of an overview of what the skill of inclusive actually is to differentiate a little bit, Brandon?
Sure. So inclusion is a really important conversation that's occurring across, I think, a global workforce right now, but certainly in the United States, this is a major topic that is rightly being discussed. How do we promote inclusion? How do we promote diversity? And this skill of inclusive does take into mind making sure different people from different places with different backgrounds and different fill in the blank feel as though they are a part of the whole, they're a part of us. And this skill does build itself and lend itself to the mindset that inclusion does require a mind that recognizes that some people naturally find themselves on the in, some naturally find themselves on the out. And as you're sorting through both, you become more in tune of when there's an out, when there's an in, and how do I bring that me and I and you or they into us, we, our. We are a collective. We work together. And as a team, we will fulfill the mission, the goal, the objective that we're aiming toward.
And sometimes in doing so, this is going to be inviting in voices and perspectives and ideas that might be a little bit different, right? It might appear a little disruptive at first, and yet oftentimes those might be ideas and focal points that could be really helping to get us to a better outcome. Is that fair to say that managers need to be able to embrace some of that as well and part of growing the skill?
I would think so. Absolutely.
Okay. So when we think of growing this particular skill, what are some of, just again, a highlight reel, what are some of the areas that managers can get into to be able to grow this skill of inclusive? Or what are signs that maybe it's not as strong as they think it is? Feel free to answer whichever side of that you want.
Sure. I think one clear test is if your team does give indication that there are silos and there is separate ways of thinking. So you have factions, you have groups that do talk about other groups. So gossip is present. There's this us against them, but even within the same unit, the same operation, that's a sign that inclusion is not being accentuated. It's not being promoted. So when that happens, a big takeaway for each of us is how then do I promote the individual contributions of my team members in such a way with specifics that others start to recognize what each person brings. I'm ascribing value. I'm giving validation so that there is a recognition across the team. Hey, each person brings something that we need. And this is the promotion of a mindset around inclusion that says, I want to make sure that I have provided a pathway, an avenue that every voice knows, though we're different, We are on equal ground here. We are part of a team.
Right on. Well, so many great insights within today's episode here. Just reminding you, one of the things that you came back to when you were talking about inspiration was one of the number one indicators for a manager's engagement, again, is their connection to that mission. How are you connected to the mission if you're managing people? Are you even aware of that mission? And how are you focusing on making that awareness for your team? Because that's going to impact your engagement. It's going to impact theirs as well. And in the space of inclusive, remember, if you're seeing those signs that there's a lot of secrets, there's silos, that's maybe an opportunity for self-awareness, for an awakening that maybe I need to grow in this particular skill of inclusive. We will catch you next time as we explore the next 3 manager intelligence skills: investment, innovation, and intentional, as part of our season 1 recap. Thanks so much for your insights, Brandon, and thank you all for tuning in. If you want to continue your growth in Leading Strong by hanging out with others committed to leading strong, join one of our LinkedIn or Facebook groups by looking for the Leading Strong Show. The truth is, organizational results like productivity, profitability, and low employee turnover rise and fall based on employee engagement. The world is starving for strong leaders, as they not only impact an organization's performance, they create massive influence on an employee's overall health and well-being. If you want to learn more about becoming a great place to work, or 34 Strong's signature Leading Strong programs, simply go to 34strong.com, where you will also be able to access resources you can start using immediately and stay connected with us. I want to thank you for sharing this episode with everyone you know who will benefit. Be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcasting channels, and please leave us a review. A big shout out to Wendell Fishman for writing and arranging the tune Aunt Lion for Leading Strong. Remember, everyone deserves a great place to work, and any workplace can be great. You can create culture by intention and design, and change happens with every life you touch. I am Darren Verasamy, here to help you lead strong. Until next time, my friends, I'm out.